Hi, I'm Walter, and today I'm here to talk to you about my funny hat. Who here knows Inspector Gadget? Okay, yeah, so for those of you who don't know, it's a fumbling buffoon who got turned into a cyborg, and he has all these gadgets inside him, but to release one he has to say, "Go gadget." So since I'm going to talk about gogoprotobuf, I thought I would dress appropriately, and I thought the gopher should dress appropriately as well. Look, very cute gopher. All gophers need hats, right? But more seriously though, I'm here to talk to you about how not to run an open source project, given all the learnings I've had on gogoprotobuf. Oh. So a while back, I developed some, well, actually recently, I developed some mild depression, and then a friend recommended I read this book, How to Be Miserable. Well, I already know how to do that. But the book is more like about how to tell you how to excel at being miserable, and then you can just do the opposite. That at least will be better. So today, this talk is also based on this book. And I will give you 40 strategies to fail at open source. And while we go on this journey, we'll take some side quests, but we're always coming back to more strategies about how to fail at open source. So if you get lost, don't worry, we're coming back to more jokes and seriousness. But before I can talk about... I told you this clicker was better than mine, but it is better than my clicker. Oh. Before I can talk about gogoprotobuf, let me just explain what protobuffers are. Who here knows what they are? Who's lying? Okay, cool. Yeah, I thought there was, but it's only one slide, so don't worry, I won't bore you. So, protobuffers are just a serialization format, but it also has a specification language, and this specification language is used to generate structs or classes in your language of choice. For example, here's one in Go, and now you can serialize this and send it to Java where someone else generated a class, and then you can communicate between these languages in kind of a type-safe manner. Okay, that's it, don't worry. Now, gogoprotobuf is just a fork of Golang protobuf, the standard library for protobuffers in Go. But it includes some extra code generation for faster serialization. It generates the structs slightly differently to make them easier to use. And it includes some other GoGo gadgets, which I will talk about as well. Okay, who here has used gogoprotobuf before? Okay, so not all of the 70,000 users are here. Okay. I was surprised by this number. The last time I worked on this project, GitHub didn't have this feature, so I had to do a slight double take. But I realized what happened here. gogoprotobuf is actually used by other projects which are popular. So it's a transitive dependency. It's used by Kubernetes, Docker, CockroachDB, Dropbox, etc.d, etc. No one here says etc.d? No? I think we should start saying, oh, nice. But I think we should start saying etc., like the past tense of etc. I listed a few things, and then I etc. Okay. Yeah. So it might look like this project is a success given all these users, but in actual fact, it's a failure. And that is because it's an orphan project without a maintainer. And now you say, hey, Walter, you're talking about this project. Why aren't you maintaining it? Well, I hope to explain this to you in the talk. And hopefully you can learn from this and not also end up with a project that is unmaintained. Okay, so as promised, let's start with 40 strategies to fail at open source. First strategy is really easy. Don't open source. Big time saver. But another way you can at least make it hard for yourself is to work at a company that has no open source project, so you have to overcome the roadblocks like having to convince the board that it is safe to open source and getting lawyers from outside the company to give their approval so you can create an open source policy. All this just so that you can create one open source project. But if you do all this, like I did, there's other ways to fail at open source. You can solve a problem that doesn't exist. I still do this a lot. I really love solving problems that don't exist, but gogoprotobuf was the one time. Yeah, I think you can know what's coming next. gogoprotobuf is the one time I didn't do that. So back in 2011, we were writing a distributed database from scratch. And it had a serializer for the metadata that was like 4 times as fast as protocol buffers. But it had a lot of other problems. It wasn't orthogonal, so we couldn't compose different things. It lacked a lot of features we wanted. It was hard to maintain. It was hard to extend. And it didn't allow any language interop, which is pretty weird if you're like a new team using Go and no one else in your company can use your database. So, but there were problems with using protocol buffers. So if you look at this, well-formatted struct. Okay. That's generated by protocol buffers. It has a few problems, especially with the pointers, because they make it awkward to use a bit, and they also mean that when you deserialize, you're allocating extra memory on the heap. And that makes it even slower to unmarshal, and it's also another pointer for the garbage collector to keep track of, and no one wants a tired garbage collector. What you want is a structure that looks more like this. Right? The pointers are removed, and you have actual types, not prototypes or base types. So what we did is we wrote a code generator that would copy between the structs we wanted to use and the structs that golang-protobuf generated. And this was also really hard to maintain. Like, it's not easy. I suspect people still do this today, but yeah, you have my sympathy, I'm sorry. It looks hard. So what gogoprotobuf did is it just generated the structs you wanted to use and then unmarshaled directly into that, skipping all the copying and extra allocations. So, pretty nice, but I still had to tackle the speed problem, and to do this there was some low-hanging fruit. golang-protobuf was using reflect, and so I just needed to generate the marshaller and unmarshaller. And then it became like more than 2 times faster, which meant it was less than 2 times slower than the serialization format we had. And given all the other problems it solved, this was now an acceptable thing for the team to move to. And so gogoprotobuf became the fastest serializer in Go in 2015. Very relevant for today. But it's still in the top 10, even though I think it's below Colfer, which is pretty fast. And for some reason, it's above flat buffers and Captain Proto, which I don't understand. I think someone needs to go look at those benchmarks. Okay, but so far everything has been a not so humble brag, right? Agreed? Agreed? No? Okay, everyone agrees, yes. Okay. Now let's start with the real failures. Let's take a meander amid my misgivings. And I forgot the poem. It starts with air, right? The first line, not the second line. Okay, let's go again. Let's take a field trip through failure, a meander amid my misgivings, a wander through my woeful blunder, so you can evade my errors and recoil from ruin and dodge a disastrous debacle, because dodging is turning around. Okay. So the first thing you want to do to fail at open source is GoGo soft fork. GoGo soft fork. Okay, the mic's look. GoGo soft fork. Alexa! Okay, but I didn't want, okay, a soft fork is when you fork a repo and you make changes to it, but you don't merge those changes back upstream. Instead, you decide I'm going to maintain this fork on my own. But whenever someone makes changes upstream, you also copy in those changes into your repo. And this can be a very manual process. If you've made changes in intricate places, merging each of these commits is a very meticulous process and quite time-consuming. I didn't want to make a soft fork. I wanted to contribute my changes upstream, but removing the pointers removed the ability to say if a field is present or not, and this was a requirement as part of the protocol buffer protocol. So that's not on the table for a standard library for Golang Protobuf. But luckily now you have Proto 3, which they changed the semantics for, so now you can generate structs without pointers. So we were just a bit ahead of our time. Next thing you can do to fail at open source is try to use analogies to convince people. Now, yeah, so Golang Protobuf has a generator and analysis part. So it analyzes the protocol buffers and then it generates them. And these two are very tightly coupled. And I was trying to convince the Go team, maybe we can separate these because I would never need to touch the analysis part. I would only change the generation part. And I said, okay, so it feels to me like you're putting peanut butter and jelly in the same jar, which apparently is a thing. The Go team was more like, oh, it's more like crunchy peanut butter, and it wouldn't make sense to ship the peanuts separately from the peanut butter. Fair, right? So don't use analogies to convince people, because they will always find a better analogy to make their point better. And also, don't use analogies with food, because people get hungry halfway through reading the thread. So you don't build any momentum and get to a conclusion. Okay. This is a horrible thing I did. I'm not proud of this. Now, I still disagree with using labeled continues. I think it's a bad idea in general. I think it's kind of a shame it's part of the Go language. And it's okay to disagree, right? But what's not okay is nitpicking is not picking the right battles. I needed to accept that Golang Protobuf had their own code base, they had control over their code, and it was just my job to merge it into my project. I didn't have control over how they wrote code, so it wasn't my worry to have. And also, there wasn't a good reason to worry about this code, because it was well tested. Right? So me merging in this code into my project and having to maintain it is not a big problem, even though back then I thought it was. But I made a bigger mistake here, and I was an asshole. Right? There was no justification for the comments I made here, and just jokes off for a second. I just want to say really sorry to the Go team. This was not cool. I'm sorry for being such an asshole. And now we're going to turn the jokes back on again, and it's going to be really hard, because now you realize what an asshole I am, but just stay with me here. We're going to make this transition work, okay? Next thing you want to do is use Paint to create your logo. Find someone else's logo, copy and paste it twice, and there you go. Double copyright infringement. What you can also do is travel back in time to when Google Plus was a thing and market your project there. And nowhere else. That's what I did. When you find out the Go community is not on Google Plus, but actually they're on Slack, install it, check it out, answer one question, uninstall the application, and never go back again. Because you're an email person, and everyone should adjust to how you prefer to communicate, instead of you adjusting to how everyone else prefers to communicate, right? No. Okay, this was a really good one. It's quite obvious, right? But these were all the options I gave you to specify how you want your serialization code to be generated. Do you want to use safe or unsafe? Do you want your size method to be called size or proto size because it might conflict with a field? And I allowed you to not only customize this on the file level, but also on the message level. And I had to support all combinations of these features. What I should have done is use the already existing protocol buffer option that exists there already, optimize for. And you can choose if you want to optimize for size or code speed. And I don't know why Protobuf doesn't actually support this. So I think I'm going to go on my knees here and just beg Protobuf, please give users the option to choose between speed and code size and avoid the need for another soft fork. And I'm on my knees and not on my hands because I'm afraid my hat will fall off, but just imagine I'm on my knees. Yeah, okay. Okay. I hopefully save someone some time. All right. Now, this is really obvious as well, but my common attitude towards open source before maintaining a project was, hey, you're giving away something for free, it must be working perfectly, right? I had incredibly high standards. I wouldn't contribute a feature. The best I would do was maybe report an issue when I was in a really bad mood. It's not good. And luckily, I had some great contributors who were much nicer than I was, and they actually contributed features, but I couldn't turn any of them into a maintainer. And when you're adding features, as a maintainer, you're holding the bucket, right? And each feature is an exponential increase in complexity if they have to work in combination with each other. So if you're the only maintainer, that just doesn't scale. You either need to not add features or you need more maintainers. Attach meaning to GitHub stars. I still do this a lot, right? I was really happy when I reached 100 stars, when I reached 1,000 stars, but they don't mean anything. Most people who start your project haven't even read the README. They're just like on Golang Weekly or on GitHub training. Oh, I should check that out. I'll never get to it. So they don't mean anything. Please don't attach any value to them. Another thing you can obsess over is your GitHub profile. GitHub is not your CV. GitHub is not LinkedIn. No one cares about your open source. At big companies, your CV goes through an automated filter, and then you get a coding question, and then if you pass, you're in. You're lucky if a human ever looked at your CV. Okay, I'm overgeneralizing here, right? It's like for some junior engineers, I think open source is pretty important. And then for the 1% of other people, I guess. But don't spend your weekends obsessing over your profile like I do. This is so toxic. You know the phrase, a change is as good as a holiday? Which means if you make a change, you don't need to take holiday. And I would just say, well, a haircut is a change, so a haircut is as good as a holiday. And I would just not take any holidays and just code. And when I was forced to take some vacation, this was in the Cedarburgs in South Africa, because I'm from South Africa. I would be lying in the camping ground under the trees, answering GitHub issues on my phone on a 2G connection. 2G. I should have been more worried about the baboons who were ransacking our tent. But okay. I actually applied to talk at the first GopherCon US, but then the web form broke. I was like, oh, that's exactly the excuse I need. I'm not applying to talk again. Oh, I don't like filling in web forms. And to be fair, I was a horrendous speaker back then. So if I got accepted, it would have been a total disaster. So trust me, we all dodged the bullet. But in general, you do want to work on your public speaking skills and market your project properly. Okay, get carried away with features. These are all the features I needed to convince my team to switch to Protobufers. But I enjoyed the code gen so much, I added all of these features. No one asked for them, it was just fun. And then the community got involved and added more features. And then I decided it's time for adding features that no one asked for. And you have to, the problem is you have to maintain these in all the combinations, right? So every feature is exponential. So you need to say no to people adding features, which is kind of hard. But even harder is you need to say no to yourself when you want to add features, because it doesn't scale. Okay, now, let's take a technical digression into one of these features I got carried away with. Who here knows the GoString method? Yeah, and who's lying? Yeah, cool, yeah, you did know. Okay, wow. Really? Come on, let's try again. Who here knows the GoString method? Okay, that's very interesting, actually. Wow, okay, very interesting. So when you have a struct and you populate it with some value, you can print it out using the percentage hashtag %v, right? And then it prints out exactly how, like the Go code that was used to populate the struct. And this is really handy because now if you have a problem in production, you can just log it with percentage hashtag %v, copy it into a test or a GitHub issue, and it makes things really convenient. But what you can do is you can actually override the behavior with the GoString method. So whenever you call print with percentage hashtag %v, it first checks, hey, do you have a GoString method? And then it will rather use that than trying to figure out how to do it itself. Here I'm just printing out exactly the same thing, but it's just for demo purposes. Problem is when you have a pointer in your struct, you can't use percentage hashtag %v because then it prints out the pointer, not the value the pointer is pointing to, which means you can't copy it into a test or report it on GitHub, which is kind of irritating. And it's done because if you want to print a graph, or you just wanted to log something, but unfortunately it's a graph, and then you get up into a cycle, and then you're just trying to log something, but you're breaking production, right? This is not a good state. Luckily, we saw Go allows you to override this behavior with the GoString method. But to do that, we first have to figure out how to specify the top 3 lines on the right. How do we do that in one line? And just put up your hand if you know how to, or one expression. Yeah, anyone? Yeah, that's fair. Oh, 1, great, well done. That's impressive. That's more impressive than me. So I was really hard-pressed to figure this out from scratch again, and even more hard-pressed to remember how I did it, even though I've done it hundreds of times. But basically, you declare an inline function that takes a value and returns a pointer to the value. And now you can use this in your GoString method, which means you can copy and paste your structures into tests and online issues again without too much effort. Maybe there's a nicer way to do it, but at least this is a convenient way to do it. What gogoprotobuf did, it had a GoString plugin that would just generate this for you, so you don't have to write it yourself. But I loved GoString so much, I created another code generator a few years later that would also generate the GoString method, but now not just for protocol buffers, for any Go struct. And what you do is you write the GoString method that just calls derive GoString function. The function doesn't exist, right? You're calling a function so you have an error right now. But then you run the code generator over your code, and it sees that, oh, you're calling a function that doesn't exist. Let me generate that for you. And then it generates the GoString method for you, which is, I think, really cool. And this project also works for hash or for deep copy, clone, and equal, compare, more things, and lots of things that weren't possible without generics before as well. This project has almost 1,000 stars. You can go and be the 1,000th star right now. You're too late. But now, just get a number in your head. How many users do you think this project has? Just get a number in your head. Did anyone guess 6? Put up your hand if you guessed 6. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I expected. See, so this was a shameless plug of another project, but I wanted to hammer in the point that stars don't mean anything. There's no correlation between stars and users, and this project is the perfect example. Okay, but back to protocol buffers. So protocol buffers, when they're parsed by Proto-C, they're parsed into another protocol buffer, which means the abstract syntax tree for a protocol buffer is a protocol buffer, and it's called the descriptor. So you can see it as the file name and like the messages and the fields in each message. But now there's a protocol buffer. I think it's really cool. I think more parsers should just parse into protocol buffers or JSON or something and be language agnostic. I really like that they decided to do this, because now also the code generators can be maintained in the language that they're generating, which means the language experts can maintain their own code generators, which I think is really cool. But since it's a protocol buffer, it means we can generate a Go string method for it, right? But why would we want to do that? This is going to be a bit mind-bending, so just stay with me, but it's okay if you don't. But we can generate a description method for our structures, which means we can return the abstract syntax tree that was used to generate the structure, which means we can do reflection, which is what was needed for us when we were writing our proto database for our query language. We needed this, and we also needed it for a proto debugger. But since we had the Go string method for descriptor, generating this was incredibly simple. Here's the code, right? We simply call %#v on the descriptors we received to do any code gen, and we're done. Side note, this did break the Go compiler because of all the code we generated, and then we had to steal a really good trick from Golang Protobuf. So they almost had the same method, and what they did, they marshaled the descriptor, then zipped it, and generated a byte slice. And then when you call descriptor, it just unzips it and unmarshals it into the descriptor, which, good trick, I love it. And now we don't break the compiler anymore. So, next thing you want to do is leave the company that paid you to work on open source. That's a really good strategy. Also, when this is your office view, it's clearly time to leave, right? And when you leave, hello? And when you leave, don't hand over the project to the people that are actually using it. No, take it with you and think you can maintain it purely in your spare time. Every office after this one has been a disappointment. Right. Now that you're relocating from South Africa to the Netherlands and you're afraid you'll lose your job because you're not getting along with your lead engineer, which means you will lose your visa and be sent back home, now's a great time to add features no one wanted. And this is just generating time, the standard time types instead of the prototypes. And it looks simple, but it's really hard. It's really hard. And this would have been the perfect feature to onboard someone onto the project, because it takes a slice right through the project. But no, I needed to do it. Oh, by the way, did I mention this is what my apartment looked like while I was building those features? Yeah, so my wife was having cluster headaches, and we just moved into an apartment that was still being renovated. So we were sleeping in the living room on this couch, and the living room didn't have any curtains, so we were waking up super early. And yeah, this is not the time to write code. And it might seem obvious to you, but it was a lesson I had to learn. Now that you're adding features no one wanted, why not add projects no one wanted? This has let me gRPC, like with eyes, and it just takes your gRPC spec, and gRPC is the RPC layer for protocol buffers, and it generates a web UI so you can debug your server. It's pretty cool, but it is the worst code I've ever written. What happens is you take the protocol buffer, you generate Go code, the Go code generates JavaScript, and then the JavaScript generates more JavaScript. And if you see all the string escaping here, I mean, if Go didn't have raw string, this would have been so much worse. But yeah, this was so hard to maintain when I open sourced it, I immediately deprecated it. Okay, now that you're adding features no one wanted and projects no one wanted, why not make another soft fork? So I was a bit frustrated with how gogoprotobuf was not able to integrate with gRPC Go at the time, and well, my previous interaction with the Go team didn't go so well, and I had not learned that it was my mistake yet. So I wasn't really up for trying to coordinate some small changes. So I just started to copy over gRPC Go and make some modifications to make it work with gogoprotobuf. Very smart. Luckily, I was at FOSDEM, where I met Johan Brandhorst, who convinced me there was a much better way to go about it, and he created a gRPC example, which showed how to integrate gogoprotobuf with gRPC, and he did this by creating two very small repos, very easy to maintain, gateway and status, and he worked with the gRPC Go team to make the changes in gRPC Go that was necessary for it to also integrate gogoprotobuf. And then he wrote some blog posts to explain how to do it. I mean, if I had not been open to receiving his help, I would have been in a much deeper hole. Right? So yeah, involve people that are asking to help. Okay. Now that you're adding features no one wanted, projects no one wanted, you're almost creating more soft forks, why not get a bunch of new interests that no one wants you to have? And join a bunch of study groups and start a PhD on the side. Aren't we all up for a challenge? No, we aren't all up for a challenge, because this leads to the ultimate strategy, burnout. Now, we South Africans love a fire, but no one likes to burn out. And the problem is you kind of get addicted to the productivity of it all, and you just want more and more of it. And you don't know how to say no to yourself, and you have incredibly high standards, and this just leads to burnout. So yeah, not cool. But then when you burn out, still don't know how to set healthy boundaries. Here's an email exchange with me and someone I'll call lazily nope, because they don't take nope for an answer. They're asking to meet me in person to discuss a PR, and I'm like, oh, I can't, but I will look at your PR, don't worry. They're asking, like, maybe we can have a video chat, and I'm trying to say no, and I keep on pushing, maybe we can have a 15-minute video chat. And I'm like, okay, I have this compulsion to reply, so let's just get this done, and let's have the video call. And then be surprised that the 15-minute video call turns into an hour, where the person is trying to force you to accept a pull request, even though they haven't proven that it would be beneficial to the project. Right? So at least at this point, I was able to say no, but there was many other opportunities which would have been much better for my mental health. Okay, next thing, start hating your job and walking back home every day thinking, at least I have an open source project that adds some value to the world. Maybe it's the best thing I've ever done. Maybe it's the best thing I ever will do. Maybe it's the only thing that gives me value. And then start a new job where you don't have any spare time to work on it, and be surprised if you develop imposter syndrome for the next 2 to 3 years. Right? You shouldn't attach all your value, well, most of your value even, to open source. Like, you are more than that? Do you know? Do you know you're more than that? Yeah, you are. I promise. All right. Now, I really needed out of the project as soon as possible, but I had not planned for succession. By the way, who's seen this show? And who thinks, oh, so few. Wow. Okay. I'm not going to explain it to you. You should watch it. It's called Succession. Okay, I'll skip my joke now. But since I had not planned for succession, you never know when you need to really get out of a project, and then you won't have time to do the handover. So this point, it was really chaos, right? Luckily, I found some friends at the company where gogoprotobuf all started. So this is Jacques Marais, and he knows how to do a blue steel, and I don't. And yeah, so I want to thank Jacques Marais and Donald Graham, because they really stepped up when I needed them most and did some really special work for me and the gogoprotobuf users out there. And they stepped up to maintain the project, but little did they know what they were getting themselves into, because I didn't have any time to do handover, so I was dropping my friends when I needed them most, and I left them with over 100 open issues and to figure out. Okay, this is a mistake we didn't make. We have lots of tests, and this gave the new maintainers some confidence to make changes to the code base, even though I wasn't there to do any handover. And to be honest, I rely on these tests a lot. Whenever someone makes a PR that I don't understand, I just ask them to write more tests until I can't think of any more edge cases, and then I accept their PR, right? And I don't think it's a bad strategy, because I still do it today in all code bases. I don't have time to read your code. I'll read your tests. And that's the end of the slide, and no one laughed. That's good. So we didn't write all these 5,000 tests and 9,000 lines of test code. We generated them, right? We run a generator. So we use the populate and test gen plugins, and we would generate these tests that would generate a random message, marshal it, unmarshal it, and check whether it's equal to the original, right? And this is called a property-based test, because whatever the input is, the property has to hold that the random input, if you marshal it and unmarshal it, it will be equal to the input. And this is one of the first things that got me into functional programming and is now getting me into proof assistance. But you can see more about that in another talk, Correct Code by Construction on YouTube. Okay. Who here doesn't have CI for their project? No one. Okay, that's good. Because it's really obvious you should have CI, right? But for a long time, gogoprotobuf had tests and no CI. And I would ask people, hey, can you run the tests? Yes, this is how you set up a Go path. Yes, this is a makefile. I know, sorry, I have a makefile. And then they would run the test and tell me it's all working, and I wouldn't trust them, and I would run it myself. And then it wouldn't be working, and I would have to debug why it's working on their computer and not mine. And then luckily, Tamir set up CI for us. So thank you, Tamir. You saved hours of my life. Now that you have new maintainers, you want to really throw them in at the deep end, right? Get a massive feature that is time sensitive and requires rethinking lots of the initial design decisions. And this was exactly what the new API for protocol buffers was good for. The timing just coincided very well when I handed over the project. And I know at one point, Jock was merging in a rewrite of a 3,500 line file that we'd made lots of modifications to. I don't know how we did this, but I know I picked some smart maintainers. Okay. Now that you need to rethink lots of initial design decisions, it would be good to have some way to get consensus from the community. But since I'd marketed my project on Google+, and not set up a community on Go for Slack, and GitHub doesn't give you a way to contact all your users, By the way, why doesn't GitHub give you a way to contact all your users? That would be amazing. Do I need to go on my knees again? Okay, but we didn't have this, and it was a big problem. All right, now imagine you're a new maintainer. You get, even though your project is used by the company, you don't get any time to work on the project, right? And now you have to choose between your job and open source. And so what we do is we just choose both, right? And we think this is great, but it's pretty naive, and it leads to burnout in lots of cases. But we also had all these feature combinations to keep track of, and the new decisions we needed to make, and also the fact that we couldn't ask the community for feedback, and then you're thrashing because you don't have time at work to work on it, so you have these small bursts where you can load in the context and start almost doing something, and then, oh, you have to switch back to work. So this leads to decision paralysis, right? Not a good place to be, because that's where the story ends. When the new maintainers also burn out, and you realize the project was built from the start in such a way that anyone working on it will burn out, at least if they're not paid to work on it in work time, right? By the way, has anyone here ever run into a burning building? And not if you're part of the fire department? Oh, you were part of the fire department? Oh, okay. Were you saving someone's life?
I was saving my house.
You were saving your house. Okay, yeah. So, yeah. This was not my house. But me and my friends ran in, and I fucked up the joke. Spoiler alert. But yeah, we ran in, get out the lamp, bring out the lamp, you go back in, you fetch the table, you come out, you realize the lamp is stolen, you go back in, fetch something else, you realize the table is stolen, and you keep on going back in because, I don't know, you're just kind of caught up in the moment. So GoGo Protobuf, just like a thatch roof, was inevitable to burn out. And now I have to apologize. Because you might think, given all the mistakes I made, I must have been doing them on purpose. But despite my best efforts, GoGo Protobuf became popular. And now I really want to say sorry to anyone who has to go out and unroll their adoption of GoGo Protobuf. I also want to say sorry to the team, the Go team, for me being such an asshole. And I want to say sorry to anyone who thought GoGo Protobuf was still maintained. But I would also like to take a moment to thank everyone who contributed to the project. The project would definitely not have survived as long without you. And I'm sure I missed a few people, but I would, before I say one more thing, can we maybe give all these people a hand? Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate all the work they've done, and it's great to hear you do too. And in conclusion, GoGo Protobuf is now GoGo deprecated. And I know this is disappointing, but if you would like more disappointing content, you can go to my YouTube channel or Medium blog or Spotify. But until then, does anyone have any questions?